Hello everyone, today I want to show you how to make this intertwining herringbone macrame necklace, and this is the one that I've made here. So what we have is macrame up both sides to then come together at the back, and I've just chosen to make a macrame closure there, adjustable. And then right down the front we go straight from the sides and into our beaded section here with the intertwining herringbone look as well. And you get this hanging from the neckline really nicely. Now this design I based off of a bracelet I previously made that looks like that. So you can see you have the same technique used in both, but obviously for the necklace it's just used slightly differently to get the curve and then turn it into the necklace for the rest of the piece as well. So I already have a tutorial for this bracelet here, but if you want to learn how to make the necklace, and also if you maybe want to make a set with it, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that I'm going to be using. What I have here is two different colours of cord, but they're both the same, and this is 1mm satin cord. I just have a nice burgundy one and then a silver tone there, so they go nicely together along with my black beads. And then as for the beads, I'm using these 12mm agate rounds in black, like I said, because they'll go nicely with the colours of my cord to contrast there. So these are the materials that I'm using, but you can obviously mix it up and use a technique with other materials. So let's get it all together and let's get started. And then we need to cut a length of cord so we can start working with it. So what I have first of all here is one length of about 1 meter, and this is going to be the holding cord for the whole piece. And then we need some working cords as well. So what I have here is 4 lengths of 2 different colours. So first of all, we need 2 different lengths here. We need one of our cords to be 7 meters long, and I've chosen the burgundy colour. That's quite a long length, but it is a necklace that we're making, and the longest one here is going to also make the sides of the necklace. And the other 3 lengths here are all 1.5 meters because we're going to add them in for the midsection, but one of them is the same colour as the long one and the other 2 is a separate colour. So I then took my shortest length of cord here, that's the holding cord, and attached that onto my macrame board in these notches here, so it's really nice and easy to work with. And what I've just made sure to do as well is leave enough of a tail so I can make a macrame closure if that's what you want to do. Obviously just take that into account. So we have this ready, so now we need to attach our first working cord onto this. And the first working cord that I'm going to take is the very longest one that we have, and I've then taken it and put the ends together because we need to find roughly where the middle is. So I'll keep hold of that here with my finger because we need to attach this, and I want to make sure the midpoint is going to be underneath the holding cord there. So I then just take one length, or one end there rather, put it underneath, and then you just want to feed the whole length through up until you get to the midpoint here. So now that I have the midpoint under the holding cord, I just want to bring it up here, and it's going to just lay there for now. Obviously it's loose, so we just need to be careful because then we need to attach this to the holding cord, so we don't have to worry about the midpoint staying in the right place anymore. So what I'm going to do is take my left side, and I just like to keep my finger on there while I'm doing the first half of it before it's tightened, over the holding cord there with the left one. Then we need to take the right side over that and underneath everything in the middle and up through the loop on the other side here, and we're making a square knot here. That's how we're attaching this working cord, and this is the first half of it. So just keep that there and then tighten this, and then that's nicely attached. And then we need to make the other half to get a full square knot, so I take my right side over the holding cord and the left side over that and underneath everything in the middle, and again up through the loop. So exactly the same, just in reverse you could say, from the other side. And again just pull this all the way through. So obviously it's a lot of cord to work with, especially here at the beginning, but the more we use it the easier it's going to get as the lengths are going to get shorter and shorter. Tighten that, and then you have your one full square knot. And now basically what we want to do is a long section of this, a row of square knots underneath each other. So I'm just going to start the next one. It's exactly the same thing. The left one goes over first, because what we want to do is then make a row of square knots here underneath each other to get to the point where we're then going to start working on the mid section, where we have the other length of working cord, so the other colour, but also we have the beads that we need to add in. So just making the other half here, finishing up this square knot. Tighten that, and there's the second one right underneath. So I'm going to make these square knots, and it's going to make kind of a plain side to the necklace, because obviously we're going to have the beads and the other colour in the middle, so I want them leaving kind of plain. Just make the length, it's not going to be quite half of the necklace, but close, obviously, until we get to that midpoint. So now I made my row of knots here, and I've ended up with about 11 inches or 28 centimetres. Obviously how long you make this will also help determine how long the final necklace is going to be, so it's completely up to you what you want. But then what we're going to do when we reach this point here, we're going to start making the midsection. We're going to attach our other working cords. So what I have is another one, so there's one on the shorter lengths here, and in this case I'm then using the same colour as the one that I've just used up there, because we want them two to be next to each other and the other colour to be underneath this. So I've then taken that length there and then put both ends together, so like that, to find roughly the middle. So I have that here, and then I want to attach this the exact same way as the first one by just using a square knot. So put one end underneath here and then lay that midpoint underneath the holding cord and just make a square knot with this cord to then attach it. Make sure the midpoint stays. Tighten that, and then the other half of it, because then that's how we attach the single cord here. And I've tightened that one knot I've now made. What we then want to do is push it all the way up underneath the previous row that we made up here. So they're now set right underneath each other, and we have two cords coming out to the side, in this case of the same colour. You want to attach the other cords as well now. So that's the other colour, and you just want to do the exact same thing. So one cord at a time, attach them the same way, so you have these two sitting underneath each other, underneath that colour there. So now I've got all the other cords attached here as well. You can see I have 4 cords on each side going out to the side, one colour at the top two and the other colour at the bottom two. And that's how we want them to sit. So now we just need to make a few more knots to kind of get into position before we make the midpoints and add in our beads as well. So I'm going to start with my top cords, the top one on each side, and then I want to bring them down over all the others, so just like that. And then we need to make a square knot with that, and it's almost kind of caging in those knots here that we just made. Just pull it all the way through. So this is the long length, just like that, and then tighten this knot right underneath the previous one, and then finish off that half to make it a full square knot. And this also gives a nice effect with the cord running along the side there. So there we go. Now the top ones moved to now be the bottom ones, and we now have some new top ones that we then want to take next, bring them down over the others, do the same thing, and you want to do that with all the cords. So once I've used the second colour as well, both of them, I know I've used all the cords here. So now that I've used all the cords there, we have the cords back in the original position, colour wise. So what we need to do now is start making the mid part that we're going to add the beads, and also kind of framing them with the rows of knots. So what we're going to do is again go back to the first one, so the top cords. Now we need to use both of them at the same time, so the two of the same colour here. And what we want to do is also get the beads ready. So I've added some beads to my holding cord in the middle, so you can push the first one up. And what we need to do is make a row of knots here to come around the outside and then hit below the bead there in the middle, attaching to the holding cord. So what we're going to do is use a vertical lark's head knot. So I'm going to take the one that's the top one, bring them both down there. The top one is going to be the working cord, and that goes over the top of the holding cord, back around and underneath and through the loop, and just pull the whole length through. So it looks a bit like that. You have a kind of a 6 looping around the holding cord, and then I tighten this all the way up underneath those little cords there going out on the side, and that's one half. Now we need to make the other half, so I bring it underneath, back around, over the top and through, and then pull it all the way through the loop there. And then again you have a 6 there, and it's looping around the holding cord, but just in the opposite direction, you could say. So it goes over to begin with, and then we brought this one under first, and then tighten that, and that's the other half, and we now have one full knot there. So you just want to do the same thing. That was one knot, we want to repeat, so we bring it over, back around and through, and then tighten that, and then we'll bring it under back around and through. And then pull it all the way through here, and then tighten that as well. So that's how we're going to be building our row of knots there. So you want to do the same thing on the other side. So you just go to that one, and it's the exact same thing but just mirrored because it's on the other side of the piece obviously. So again, it's the top one or the outer one depending if you're holding it downwards here. That's the working cord. So bring it over, back around and through, all the way, and tighten that, and then bring it under, back around and through, and pull the whole length through here, and there you go. Then that's one full knot there as well. So you just want to make your rows here, one on each side. So now I have the knots there on the sides. You have those rows going from the top and then down towards the bottom. So if I push up my bead, you can see they're going to sit and frame the bead nicely. But what I've done as well is, because we want this to be the necklace and we want the curve, on this side here, that's going to be kind of the inside of the necklace. So here I've made 9 knots, and on this side here is going to be the underside, you could say, that I've made 11 knots. So that's how we're going to achieve that curved effect, is by making less knots on one side and more on the other. So then I push up my bead here, and then we need to connect the two sides to the middle as well. So what I'm going to do is take the cords that were the holding cords first of all, one from each side. Then I want to connect these around the holding cord with a square knot. So just a regular square knot there, and then tighten this all the way up, right underneath the bead. Then the other half. And then just before I tighten that, I just like to retighten the first half, kind of hold it in place so it doesn't want to come apart, and then tighten the other half. And there we go. And then put them out to the side. And then we just want to bring down the ones that were the working cords over the ones we just used, and also make a square knot around the holding cord in the middle. And then tighten that. And again make the other half, so we make it one full square knot. It's much more secure than just the one half. And then tighten that. So there we go. And you can kind of push it up a little bit, and then that'll help those knots get closer to the bead and cage it in just nicely. So there we go. That's the first bead in place and caged in. So now we made the rows of knots with these coloured cords here. Now we need to go back up and take the next top one. So in my case that's the grey ones. We need to do the exact same thing, make rows of knots to then add in the next bead, go underneath that. But we just need to make a different amount because it's a larger space that we have to cover now, because this was just the one bead. Now we actually have to cover the two. So we just start in the same way. Go back to the top ones there, one side at a time, and then out of those two cords, the bottom one, when you hold them out to the side, is going to be the holding cord, and the top one is the working cord. And then we just do the exact same thing as before, make our vertical axe head knots there. So I take the top cord over, back around and under, and pull it through, tighten that all the way up, and then that goes underneath the previous rows that you were just doing. So just make sure to tighten it all the way in, and then under, back around and through, and then tighten that, and then that's one full knot there and the beginning of that row. So you want to keep making knots here, and then exact same thing on the other side, just like we did before, just mirrored because it's on the other side. So the top one, the working cord, goes over, back around and through, tighten that again, goes all the way underneath, and then under, back around and through, just like that. And that's how you want to build your rows with this group of cords now to reach underneath that next bead that we're going to bring in. So then as for these rows here, on this left side, which is the kind of, you could say, shorter one, the inside one, I've made 13 knots, and on the outside one I've made 17 here on that side. So then we just want to do the exact same thing. Now what can also help, I just want to mention, because this is going to end up being curved, so in my case I'm working on my macrame board. That's ideal for, say, bracelets and things like that, but when you want to do a curved piece, obviously you can't really have it tied out and fastened like that as you would with a bracelet. So what could help is just loosen it up a bit, or you could also start working with pins to pin your working as you go, to be able to work and get that curve in, but still have your work kind of fastened down to make it easier to work with. But then I'm going to do the same thing here, connecting these two sides. So I start with the holding cords, one from each side, and then do a square knot with them. And then we want to tighten this, because what you can see here is we're wanting to get that curve in. You can see where that's placed regarding the knot there. So it doesn't come straight down as if we were making a bracelet. And that's because we made different amounts of knots on each side. Again, the other half here, and then just tighten the first half again. Hold that in place while tightening the other half. Something like that. And then, that's the first ones. We want to use the other ones as well. So that was the working cords. Make a square knot with them. Over the others, and then tighten that. And the other half, and there we go. That's now these rows that we just made tied down as well and fastened together in the middle. And then you can slowly start to see I've loosened my piece up a little bit. I might end up going over and working with the pins like I mentioned, it might make it easier. But it's going to start to, you can start to slowly see a bit of a curve forming, because it's going to be a bigger space we're making the bottom rows there, or the outside ones. So that's really now the main part is going to be repeated now. The first little one I did up here by the first bead, that was different because it was a shorter space we had to cover, but now we're just going to keep repeating this. So the amount of knots that I made here is going to get repeated. So I'm going to push my next bead up. Then we want to make our next rows of knots with the next ones, the furthest ones up now, which in this case again is the burgundy colour. That's the first one we used as well. But we want to make the same amount of knots that we just did here. And then, like I said, keep working to get that curve along the way. And you just want to keep doing this until you reach the point where you're going to add your last bead, because then we need to do the same thing as we've done here. So I then kept going here across the midsection. We've then added all my beads, and I have a nice curve in there now. So I'm happy with how that looks, and this is then the end of it. And then we need to obviously get to the other side. So where we've ended up is I've added my last bead. In total I have 6 here, so the 6th one is my last bead. And then what we want to do again, because this is the last one, we have a shorter space we need to cross with the side rows there. So what we need to do is repeat the first one. So that's different than all the others. So what I've done is I've made 9 knots on the inner side there, and then I made 11 on the outer one. And that's the same as the first one, like I said. It's going to fit perfectly to then reach below here the previous knots that were made with, in my case, the grey or the silver cord there. So now what we need to do is finish off this end, and I do that by connecting the 2 rows, again the 2 sides, just like the other times. So take the holding cord first from each side, then we need to make a square knot here around the holding cord, pull it all the way through, and then as I'm pulling this tight, it's going to pull the 2 sides together. The other half of it, like that. And then again, make sure to pull the first half of the knot tight before you then tighten the other half, just to make sure it tightens exactly how you want it to, like that. Bring the other 2 down from the same colour here, that were the working cords, and then make a square knot with them, just underneath again. And the other half again, and there we go. So that's now the whole midsection done. And what you can do just one final time, while you still can, you can always just take the holding cord there, hold on to it, and then just push up on the knots, just to make sure everything is nice and tight together and has the nice curve, because that helps with the curve as well. So all we need to do now is also just repeat that first little bit. So to do that, again we just need to make some more square knots using the next colour. So you put them all out to the side, and then we'll go right back to the very top one. So grab the top ones, bring them down over all the others, and then make a square knot with them. And that's where you then get the cords that you're making the knot with going along the side of the previous knots. And as you keep doing that using the other cords as well, you're going to be able to see them more. They're kind of framing in the knots. And you just want to make sure again to use every single cord, use one. So I've used them two. I'm going to go back to the top, use the other two that are the same colour, bring them down, make my square knot, and then we need to go back and use, in my case here, the burgundy colour. Also use each of them once, make a square knot, so we end up with them as the last one, because we need to make sure we have them as the last one to make sure that that's the colour that was on the previous side. We're also going to make the other side with that same cord. Now I used all the cords here, and what we then can do is, first of all, we need to get rid of some cords. Either you can do that now, you can leave it, but what we also need to make sure is that we have the right cords at the very bottom. So the final colour here, that's the right colour that I need to use for the side. So I'm done with the greyish silver ones there, so I can just put them out of the way. Then out of these ones, what we want to make sure to do is that's the longest cords that we have on the bottom here, so as the bottom knot. And in this case, it's actually not. The ones that's on the bottom are the shorter ones that I attached, so the longest ones are the second ones from the bottom. So what I need to do is just bring them down once more. So you might, if you use some different materials and made it a bit different than mine, maybe use some other beads and used more beads or less beads, then you might have ended up with the longest ones on the bottom, and then that's absolutely fine, you don't have to do anything. But since mine are the second from the bottom here, then I'm just going to bring them down over the other ones and literally just make one more square knot, and that brings it right to the bottom, and it's still really nice and seamless because it's the same colour, so it's going to blend in nicely. So just bring that down, tighten that, and then the other half there, and then that just brings those long cords down ready to make the other side of the piece if they weren't there naturally. So just like that, as you can see, really nice and seamless. So now at this point we can use these long ones, but like I said, you can either choose to finish these off now, or you can choose to wait. If you want to do it now because maybe they're a bit in the way, then by all means do that, or you can leave it to the end so you maybe don't risk cutting off the other ones that you need to use. But if you're using a synthetic cord, you can cut them down and singe off the ends a little bit, just like I'm using here. But if you're using a natural cord, or if you're using a synthetic but you prefer to use glue, what you can do is just put a bit of glue in the back, make sure you catch the cords there, and then cut down the excess. So cut it off, and then that's also nicely on the back, so you won't really be able to see that. So get rid of these cords here, so the top two of the other colour, and then the short ones of the other colour that we're using for the side as well. So make sure you have the longest ones that originally was the very longest cord, still we can use for this side here. And then all you want to do now is continue making your square knots. So we're basically just going to have the other side here, repeat it the exact same, and you obviously want to make it the same length as well. So I then made the whole length here on the other side as well. So we had the first side, the midsection, and then the last one here that I did as well, just making it just as long as the first side. And then just all that's left to do really, the main piece is done now. What we have left is I have my excess working lengths of cord here we need to get rid of. We just do that the same way as the other ones. You can either use glue and then cut off the excess, so just put glue around the last knot, or you can then cut them down to a short length and then singe the ends if it's a synthetic cord you're using. So get rid of those, and then in this case, like I said, I'm going to be making a sliding macrame knot. So I'm just going to use the two lengths, one on each end of the holding cords, so I just have a short length there, and use that to make my macrame knot. That's a clasp, you could say. So get rid of those cords, and then either do that, or you could also use cord ends to make it a nice finish, and then use actual findings to make a clasp as well. So that's all that's left to do really to finish off this piece. And then once you've finished off the end with whatever kind of closure you want, then you have your finished necklace. And so here's then the finished necklace after I finished off the other ends there. So made my macrame closure, like I said. It looks like that. And then there you have the midsection. So it's going to hang nicely on the neckline, having the long sides there with the macrame, with the nice beaded section there and the intertwining herringbone look there right in the middle. So that's how you make this necklace. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.